to DCS F-14B Quick Start Training. I'm Top Gun with the AKA Wardog Squadron. This is going to just cover the pilot seat. I'll be having Jester take care of the checklist for his part in the back. And this is going to differ a little bit from other startup trainings in the fact that this is going to be cutting out all of the non-critical tests and checks of systems and subsystems. I'm also using the INS preset, so if you want to speed up your INS alignment, what you can do is you can go into the mission editor and choose your F-14 and go to advanced waypoints. Go to the last tab and there's a checkbox there that's not checked by default for INS preload. So if you check that and then save and go back into start up the mission, that'll shave about 4 minutes off your INS alignment if you're doing a fine INS align. So it'll take it from 8 minutes down to about 4. So that helps speed things up too. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So let's do ICS to middle position to hot mic. And I'm going to be working off of my version, checklist version 1.1. Everything that's in red text is items that are already in the correct position for startup, so you don't need to worry about them. If you come back in to repair, so you have to shut down, when you go to restart, you'll need to check on those steps just to make sure they're in the correct position still. The items in blue text are items to either you're contacting ground crew or ATC, or you're interacting actively with Jester. So let's go ahead and contact the ground crew. Let's rearm it this time. And I'm just going to put a couple of sidewinders on.
Request rearming.
And bear in mind, if you use cannon rounds and you have them rearm the cannon, that counter does not go back up by default, so you need to change that. In a cold cockpit, it starts off at 0. Full loadout is 670. So just remember, if you use some cannon rounds and you come back to rearm, you'll need to reset that.
Rearming complete.
Okay, let's go ahead and have ground power put on. So communications menu, back to ground crew, ground electric power,
Chief, turn on the ground
F1 to
power.
on.
Copy. Ground power is now on.
Alright, let's go back to ground crew again for the air. So F5 for ground air supply, connect.
Chief, connect ground air supply. Copy. Ground air supply is now connected.
And oxygen forward on, it's a little hidden under these hoses, so you got to crane around to see it. And let's contact Jester to do his startup. The default is the A key. So let's do regular startup.
Copy.
And then he'll subsequently do an ICS check here in a second.
ICS comm check.
So let's do loud and clear.
Roger that.
And let's arm the ejection seat. The switch is on top of the seat, or you can do a left shift E.
Closing canopy. Check.
So Jester takes care of the canopy for you, so you don't need to worry about it. Let's go ahead and do interior lighting.
Okay, ready to start.
So we've got ACM already on, indexers already on, instrument lighting if you want it, on, console, same thing. And let's do exterior lighting. So start off with exterior lights master mode switch. You have to have that key bound. And I like to start off, even if it's daytime, I like to start off with turning the taxi light on, just so that I can see, if your master mode exterior light switch is not on, then you won't see your taxi light either. So this is kind of a cheat way to determine that your exterior light master mode switch is in the correct position, because if you look around your aircraft, you can't really see any other exterior lights unless you cheat and go to your F2 view. So this is kind of about your only way to really determine fully if your exterior lights are working. So let's do anti-collision, forward to on, formation if you want them, position wing, and position tail, and mode, I set the flash until I'm ready to go. Air source to off, that's already set by default. UHF radio set to both. Now let's contact Jester to set ATC frequency. I'm at Seneca Kolke, so 132. So we choose the middle option, and then the ARC 182 radio. And we'll just do tune manual so you can see how it's done. So 1, 3, 2, and then 0, and that brings up a sub menu. So zeros and zeros.
Okay.
So that tells him to set the radio to the frequency you want. Now you can contact ACC. So bring up your mic activation, which you'll have to keybind, and go to ATC, your airfield at the top of F1, and then F3 for start.
Kolke, in field 1-1. Request startup. Field 1-1. Kolke, cleared for startup.
Alright, so right engine crank, hold it for about 3 seconds. So right click. And then we're looking for RPM around 20%. And once it gets up there, we put the right throttle over the idle cutoff. And you actually can do that by clicking in the cockpit. You have to click on the actual handle base. But it would be recommended to go ahead and keybind that. And we're waiting for the engine to stabilize, which will be between 60 and 70. Alright, now at this point we can contact ground crew to disconnect electrical power. So communications menu, go to the parent if you have to. Ground crew, electrical, off.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now off.
Alright, now the same process for the left engine. So left click and hold for a couple seconds. At 20%, go ahead and spool up the left. And we wait for this one to stabilize until we move on. And now we can go ahead and have ground crew disconnect the air supply. So back to ground crew, F5, disconnect.
Chief, disconnect ground air supply. Copy. Ground air supply is now disconnected.
Alright, so now we can do air source to both engines. And now we can contact Jester to have him do his fine alignment. He should be about ready by now. And we want INS go fine.
Roger that.
Now, if you want to see what the progress is of his alignment, you can next go over to the HSD, up to on, and then for the mode, middle position for TID. And what you're looking at is this little caret right here, which will travel across the screen as he aligns. You can also see what he's doing here as far as what he's typing in. So you'll see him typing in some coordinate information, elevations, and etc. All right, so let's continue. We got SAS pitch, roll, and yaw channels all forward on. TACAN to TR, you kind of have to crane your head around to see this knob. So 2 clicks to point to the 12 o'clock position. ARE 63 power, forward on. Radar altimeter, rotate that to turn the system on. VDI power, up to on. HUD power, up to on. ADI uncaged, just have to left click on the knob over here. You may have to adjust a little bit, just mouse wheel over it. Wing sweep, so mouse wheel fully forward, then right click to press down, close the guard, and you need to do wing mode to automatic. You'll need to key bind that so that you can access it. It's not really clickable, I don't think, in the cockpit. And anytime you change this, the wing sweep manually, you have to hit master reset at the end. And the moment you do that, wings start coming out. Now for the flaps, it's kind of dependent on your loadout and your situation. If you're at an airfield and you're not extremely heavy, you can get by with probably no flaps or just use the DLC maneuver flaps only. If you're on the carrier, and especially if you're really heavily laden down, you may want to go ahead and you can actually take off with full flaps. You can mouse wheel over the flaps control too to go choose a position intermediate anywhere in between. Although if you do a key binding to flaps up and down, it's basically all or nothing. So it's going to be 0% or 100. But since I'm not carrying much, I can just let it go. Radar altimeter, press and hold for a couple seconds and then let go, and then we can rotate this to set our minimum altitude bug. I tend to set it at like 300. Anti-skid spoiler, I tend to do up for both. Although if you're just taxiing, you can get away with just putting it into the down position for spoiler only. Wing exterior tanks, middle to auto. That's already set by default. Barometric altimeter. If you zoom in, you'll see here that it's actually set to standby. In order to get that out of the standby mode, you have to right click to rotate this switch over, and you have to click and hold it for a good couple of seconds until that flag goes away. Go ahead and activate your nose wheel steering. That's another one that you'll have to key bind somewhere in the cockpit, since that's one of the items on the stick. At this point, we're basically waiting for Jester's alignment to finish. So like normally, if you don't have an INS preload selected in the mission editor, like I said, this would normally take about 8 minutes for him to start his, to do his INS alignment process from start to finish. Since we did a preload, it would take 4. Actually, since this is a new mission I just made, that's going to be the full 8 minutes. So, but as you can see, it's already pretty much there. We've kind of taken up most of the time he's needed to get this fully up and aligned. But in all of my regular missions, I ensure that when I'm making that, I go in to do those preloads for all F-14s that are in it. So at this point, we can, if we have wingmen around us, we can let them know that we're pretty much ready to go by switching our position lights from flash back down to steady. And one important piece to note is if you're still in the alignment process, do not touch your parking brake. The moment you touch that, it will stop the alignment process. So you have to kind of leave that go until that's done. So if you want to do a small amount of flaps, we can do DLC. Again, that's another one that you're going to have to key map because that's on your stick. But we can press DLC to activate, and then we can do DLC down. You can see it's up and down here. So I can do slight down for maneuver flaps. And we can see our forward slats have extended a little bit as well. And at some point, I'll be doing the Jester checklist, the quick start. I'll try and do the same thing where I'm basically cutting out all of the checks that don't really seem to be absolutely necessary. Now, obviously, if you're running DCS with random failures turned on, you probably don't want to do this checklist because, like I said, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. If you go through the checklist by the book, there's a lot of steps there for testing various systems and lights and everything else. It probably adds at least a good 10 minutes to the checklist on top of, the 8 plus or so minutes that it takes for the INS alignment. So you're looking at probably 15 to 20 minutes to get this bird ready to go if you're doing, absolutely everything. You can see at this point it's aligned enough to the point where we're starting to see stuff showing up. And you can hear Jester in the back clicking away at a few more things. So he should be wrapping up here momentarily.
Ready to taxi.
And there you go. You've got his permission. So at this point, put your brakes on, parking brake off. You can contact ATC for taxi clearance. So mic activation, F5 for ATC, F1 for your airfield, request taxi.
Call key. Infield 1-1. Request taxi to runway. Infield 1-1. Copy. Clear to taxi to runway 9.
And this does have a pretty tight turn radius, and it does not have high and low modes like the Hornet does, but it does have a pretty tight turning radius, although I would say not as tight as the Hornet. So you will probably want to experiment with this on an airbase just to get used to how tight this thing will turn. At this point, go ahead and contact ATC for takeoff clearance and to get the QFE.
Call key. Infield 1-1. Request takeoff. Infield 1-1. Copy. You are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 29.88.
So get their QFE information and you can dial into your barometric altimeter right there. But that's pretty much it. At this point, you're all set to go. I'll probably do a similar checklist to this for carrier takeoff and how to get lined up on the shuttle without having to use exterior views and whatnot. But this is good enough, at least to get started for airbase operations. So as usual, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.